What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Titletown Talk. I'm your host, Ian Ewing. On today's episode, we're going to talk through the Cowboys-Packers Week 4 tie game. We're going to go through what went right, what went wrong, and why they lost, all of that. Let's start with the positives from the game. The biggest positive, in my opinion, there were many, right? And we'll go through all of them. The first one I want to talk about is the running game. Obviously, there's been no semblance of a running game through the first 3 weeks, sorry. I've talked about it a few times on this podcast, right? Most teams have gone into games against the Packers saying, hey, we need to stop Josh Jacobs. Let's make Jordan Love beat us. And we'll get into Jordan Love in a minute. He has more often than not beaten the opposing defense. In this game, it was the total opposite. The Cowboys played too deep the entire game, meaning there's one less defender in the box, aka they dared the Packers to run the ball. They thought that, and part of this was Jerry Jones probably too, they thought that they could stop the run good enough with their front seven and not have to bring a safety down. In this game, we saw Josh Jacobs go for 86 yards on 21 carries, I believe. Emmanuel Wilson had a great game in this one as well. He was, I believe, 6 carries for 45 yards, something like that. I thought the running game looked really, really good in this one. The running backs played well. Josh Jacobs had a couple of just ridiculous, sick moves in this game. The touchdown that he had in the fourth quarter, I believe, where he cut inside and scored. I mean, Josh Jacobs is a really, really good player. And we're going to talk through my bold predictions and where they're at the bye week. That's going to be one of our episodes this week. Hot take. I was wrong about Josh Jacobs. I thought that we might see a little bit of a fall off from him where this would become his last season in Green Bay. This game did not back that up. And Emmanuel Wilson looks like a starting running back in the NFL. I do think, and I don't think this is a hot take, Emmanuel Wilson's going to be the future starting running back for the Packers. I don't know if it's going to be next season. Probably not. But I think 2027, Emmanuel Wilson's going to be our guy at running back. Okay. So the running game, massive improvement against a good run defense. I want to be very clear about that. The Cowboys, after all the jokes that have been made about Jerry Jones, many of them on this podcast, I mocked him ruthlessly and ended up looking stupid, by the way. In the last episode that we did, this is a good run defense. The Packers did a lot better running the ball in this one. That brings me to the next positive, the offensive line. I won't get into it too much. They did allow, I believe, 15 pressures in this game, so Dallas was able to get pressure on Jordan. He was just better than their pass rush, ultimately. They only got 1 sack. I thought the offensive line was pretty stable for basically playing their, 8th and 9th offensive linemen, or 7th and 8th, I guess is a better way to put it. So I thought overall, we finally didn't have any injuries. They didn't have to shuffle the line in the middle of the game. We saw run lanes open up in this one. Jordan had time to throw for the most part. It wasn't great, but it was solid, and I would say it's a massive improvement after what we saw against Cleveland. Let's talk about Jordan Love. He's probably the biggest positive from this game, in my opinion. Clutch throw after clutch throw after clutch throw. A week after throwing that, essentially game-ending interception against the Browns, Jordan showed up ready to play in this one. He made a bunch of just crazy third down throws. The fourth down throw to Golden in overtime that brought them down to get the game-tying field goal. There were just a lot of really, really good plays in this one. I thought Jordan played easily his best game of the season. I know, statistically, doesn't always tell the whole story. There was a lot of run after catch in this one. His average depth of target was definitely above average, but it wasn't what it was in week 1 and 2. Overall, I just thought it was really nice to see Jordan rebound after, a pretty bad performance against the Browns. I mean, again, I actually thought it wasn't too bad, but objectively, that interception sort of clouded a pretty good game. Let's go over Jordan's stats so far this season. He has exactly 1,000 yards passing, 8 touchdowns to 1 interception, 69% completion, 113.4 rating. So right now, he's basically he's top 5 in every category. I don't have the stats in front of me, but when it comes to EPA per play, PFF grade, QBR on ESPN, he's basically top 5 in every single category. He's averaging 8.3 yards per attempt, which is crazy, and he's tied for 3rd in the NFL in touchdown passes. I believe he has the 2nd highest quarterback rating as well. So, again, I just think that Jordan, one thing that I said going into the season was Jordan was going to be in that MVP conversation the whole season. I don't want to say that I'm surprised by how good he's playing, because I'm not. But we've seen, last year we saw what I would call a average Jordan Love after seeing great Jordan Love at the end of 2023. So far, we're seeing, essentially like 2023 Jordan Love, but like I think a little bit better, a little bit more consistent. He's definitely more consistent mechanically. Even in that 23 season when he was playing so well at the end, we saw a lot of those, fadeaway passes. We saw a lot of, I wouldn't say boneheaded decisions, because that's not the case, but I thought he made some really random plays. He's just been really smart this season. Outside of the one throw against Cleveland, which we won't talk about, the interception that shall not be named, we're going to call it. And then he got away with that one against the Lions in week 1. Outside of that, the dude has been pretty much money. I think he has only 3 turnover-worthy plays this whole season. So, yes, he fumbled in this one. We'll talk about that fumble in a minute, but I thought he played really, really well. Romeo Doubs, man, the dude is he's just good, man, ultimately. I answered a question in the podcast a couple weeks back about, do the Packers re-sign Romeo Doubs? 3 touchdowns in this one. That fourth down or the third down play going down to take the 34-30 lead on third down, Jordan put that ball up. Only Doubs could get it. He's the only receiver on the team that can make that play. And you see it time and time again. When Jordan needs a play, who does he go to? He goes to Romeo. And Romeo has not dropped a pass this year. His hands look insanely good. He's a great blocker. He looks a lot faster this season too. I just think that Romeo has really shown up this season. I think he's definitely the Packers' number 1 wide receiver right now. That was one that I was wrong about. I expected Dontavian Wicks to take that over this season, but look, I'm happy to be wrong. I think the Packers are going to have to, if he continues playing this way all season, they're going to have to take a really hard look at re-signing him. Ultimately, I think he's too important on the offense at this point, and we'll see. Right? I want to talk about Carl Brooks as well. Devontae Wyatt went out. By the way, LaFleur said yesterday in his press conference, I'm recording this Wednesday morning, he mentioned yesterday that Devontae Wyatt was week to week. So I wrote in my notes here, I wrote these notes prior to hearing that yesterday, so I'm going to sort of ad-lib this a little bit. Devontae Wyatt being out is a big loss. However, the next 4 games, I think they're going to be able to do just fine. They're playing a couple of pretty bad offenses in there. So if Devontae misses, 2-3 weeks, I think they're going to be okay. But when Carl Brooks came into the game here, he ended up finishing with 5 pressures. He should have had a sack on Dak. I know he got the face mask penalty that sort of negated it. Ultimately, yeah, he did grab the face mask. It wasn't too bad. I thought he stepped in relief and played really, really well. He had an 82 pass rush grade from PFF. Remember, 60s average, so well above average. The issue is he did not play well against the run. And yeah, the game, there was a lot of bad tackling. We'll get to that in a minute. But the Dallas running game has been good all season, and they played well in this one too. And Carl Brooks could not get off a block in this one. It was pretty bad. And then Nazir Stackhouse played a lot of snaps in this one. I don't think he's going to play a lot of snaps going forward. He had a 30 grade from PFF. I thought he looked terrible. Justice Mosqueda from Acme Packing Company, he posted a couple videos on Twitter of Stackhouse just getting completely dominated. So we have not seen Warren Brinson, the 6th round pick this season. I expect when Devontae Wyatt misses the next game, I think he will. I think we're going to see Brinson up, and I think Brinson is going to play more than Stackhouse. Lastly, let's talk about Micah Parsons. So I know going into the game, Micah was all the headlines. They had, by the way, that interview with Jerry Jones at the beginning of the game, it was the cringiest thing I've ever seen. Like, I know, again, there's not a lot of people listening to this podcast, but if anybody starts listening to it and listens to this later, I'm a Jerry Jones hater. If he had it his way, the Green Bay Packers would not exist. The fact that we're fan-owned and, not what I would call a corporate team, it's not the right word, but for lack of a better word, I just can't stand Jerry Jones. I think back in the 70s, he wanted the Packers not to exist. Again, I think he sucks. He's bad for the NFL personally. You can disagree with that if you want. So I have a little bit of bias here, but I thought that interview at the beginning of the game was just brutal. Micah Parsons. So I expected him to come away with, 3 sacks, dominated the game, and it didn't feel like he dominated the game. We'll get into why in a minute, but he did dominate the game. He finished with 10 pressures in this one. He ended up getting that sack to save the touchdown, by the way, in overtime. He was held non-stop in this game. I'm sure all of you have seen at this point, whether you follow, Packers fan pages online or wherever you follow the Packers, I've been seeing this non-stop. He was literally getting choked out on a play, and they didn't call holding on it. So, I do think that the Cowboys kind of went into it saying, well, they can't call holding on every play, so let's just hold him. And, Micah probably would have had 3 sacks in this one. He almost had that forced fumble on Dak. He missed it by 3 inches, and Dak ended up completing that pass too, I think. Again, it's a game of inches, and that showed up in this one. But he played really, really well in this game. He had a 34% pass rush win rate, which is absolutely insane. The average player wins 12% of the time. The dude won 34% of the time. So again, he didn't dominate the game. He didn't do ultimately what I thought he was going to do, but he was the best player on defense in this one. And everyone else on that defensive line played pretty badly, and Micah showed up. He currently leads the NFL in pressures after 4 weeks. Not surprised at all. Nobody else played near to the level that Micah did in this game. His PFF grade was 94 in the end. They needed somebody else to step up on defense, and nobody else did, and we'll talk about that. Let's talk about what happened on defense. Yeah, let's roll right into it, right? Let's start with tackling. Tackling was brutal in this game. Edgerrin Cooper, who's been probably the best tackler on the team, had a 29 run defense grade. He had, I think his tackling grade was 29. It was just brutal. Guys, they tackled so bad. Xavier McKinney tackled poorly in this game. He never tackles poorly. So there's probably some reasons for it. I would expect part of it is and we'll get to Dak in a second. Dak played a game of his friggin' life. It just felt like they could not get their guys down to the ground. One thing that I've loved about Hafley's defense since he got here last year is they just tackle better. And, tackling is fluky sometimes. I don't think you can just become a good tackler. I really don't. I think you have to draft guys who can tackle. And I think the Packers overall have. Say what you want about Quay Walker. Certainly suspect in coverage at times, but coming out of Georgia, he did not miss tackles. He's got really long arms. Edgerrin Cooper doesn't miss tackles. Everybody missed tackles in this game. It was pretty bad. The Packers played off coverage a lot, which we'll talk about in a second. And it just felt like every time one of the Cowboys guys caught the ball, the corners were 3-4 yards away, and then the receiver would make a move and they would gain 5-7 more yards, right? They just have to tackle better, and I think this is that. They have not shown us at any point under Hafley that they are a bad tackling team. This game was bad, so they need to get better. They need to work on that in the bye week. Let's talk about Dak Prescott. On the preview episode, I said very clearly, Dak is very underrated. If Dak goes God mode in this game, the Packers could lose this game. And I think God mode is probably putting it too lightly. I thought he played insanely well in this game. Big time throw after big time throw. The main reason he did so well, though, and this was clearly the Cowboys' game plan, was just get the ball out in under 2 seconds. If we don't get the ball out quick, Micah and the boys are going to be there ready to hit us, and that was what they did. Not only did Dak get rid of the ball quickly, he put it in the right place every single time. He didn't have a single bad throw in this game. He had that really random-ass deep ball in the first quarter on third down that Nixon dove for. It was kind of all the way back by the end zone. That was probably the only throw I can remember that wasn't great. PFF graded him at 84. I thought that was an underrate. I thought he was much better than that. I'm not actually sure why he didn't get a higher score than that. I thought he was insane. He was really decisive. He knew where to go in every single play. He made the right read every time. Here's the crazy part. So when Dak was under pressure in this game, I'm going to read these stats, and I want you guys to just wrap it. This is insane. When I saw this stat, he was 12 for 14, so only 2 incompletions, for 162 yards and a touchdown. So let me read that again. Dak was under pressure 19 times, I believe, is the final pressure numbers. He went 12 for 14, 162 yards, and a touchdown. That is incredible. There's a lot of concern for the defense from some people, not for me. But no matter what else happens this season, if the Packers get 19 pressures on a quarterback, they're not going to do half as well as Dak did in this game. So, to give you some more, just to illustrate how on fire Dak was in this game, that deep ball in overtime that got them down into field goal range, Dak rolled right. He got pressure from, I believe it was LVN on that play. Might have been Brooks. I don't remember. He rolls right. He just throws a prayer downfield to, I forgot doesn't matter, the receiver. The name is escaping me, whoever it was. Number 1. He throws that ball down there. Keyshawn Nixon thinks the play is over, which, you got to, crap on him a little bit for that. He should have been paying attention. But that ball had a 7.2% completion probability. I'll say that again. 7.2% completion probability. So in other words, if that play happened 100 times, it would have only been completed 7 times. So to give you some more context, that was the second most improbable completion in the Next Gen Stats era. So again, that throw just shows you how on fire Dak was. The dude just couldn't miss. So because of that, it made the defense look a lot worse than they were. And I think that Dak is going to have that team, despite how bad the defense is, and they were bad. Again, Dak, especially when CeeDee Lamb gets back, Dak, Pickens, Ferguson, and the other receivers are escaping me. Sorry, guys. It's early in the morning still. I think the Cowboys are going to win 8-9 games just because of how good Dak is. So we'll see. I heard a lot of talk going into the game that the Cowboys are a terrible team, and I don't believe it. The Packers should have won this game, yes, but sort of like what happened against Cleveland last week, everything that could have went wrong, everything that had to go right for the Cowboys to win, it went right. And the last thing I want to talk about is the cornerbacks. So there's been a lot of talk about the cornerbacks this week. Nate Hobbs and Carrington Valentine, they both played really poorly in this game. Nate Hobbs played a lot more than Valentine, and I thought Hobbs was getting beaten quite a bit. I expected them to put Valentine in. They ended up putting him in a bit later in the game, and he played worse than Nate Hobbs. Carrington Valentine's, in my opinion, I thought going into the season was their best cornerback. Clearly, Keyshawn Nixon is, and he played well in this one too. Because Dak was getting the ball out so quickly, like I said earlier, the pass rush could not get there. And the fact that it was getting there early in the season, that covered up some holes for the cornerbacks. And I'm not concerned about them by any means, but I don't like their depth already. So if any of those guys get hurt, man, that's scary. But here's what I don't understand, and I hope somebody asks Hafley this week. All season long to this point, they've been up, not necessarily playing press, but they were at least challenging receivers at the catch point. They were not playing this far off zone coverage the whole season. In this game, it just felt like they were. And there were so many plays where, the game plan was clearly, let's have Dak get rid of the ball as fast as possible, which he did. But the thing that's crazy is the cornerbacks were so far off that Dak was able to complete most of those. If the cornerbacks were playing closer to the receiver, now granted, I think, Pickens is going to win a lot of those. Pickens is a really good player. Definitely played well in this one. He had 130 yards, whatever it was. So again, I just felt like this was Joe Barry 2.0. Just really far off coverage, gave Dak way too much room to fit it in there. I just didn't like that. I think that there's hopefully a learning moment in this one. It just felt like Hafley was playing scared in this one. And we hadn't seen that so far this season. We really didn't see it much of last season. So hopefully they can get that corrected. Last thing, nobody else really got pressure consistently. Rashawn Gary had a good grade in this one, but it was mostly due to run defense. He didn't register a single pressure in this game. There were a couple plays when I watched the All-22 where he drove the left tackle back. He didn't get pressure, but again, I think he would have had Dak not gotten rid of the ball faster. So I'm not saying that Gary played poorly in this one, but they needed somebody else to step up. And when Devontae Wyatt went out, it just felt like they lost. It was all Micah at that point. And you guys, I got to stress again how good Devontae Wyatt's been this season. He has a 24% pass rush win rate, or 21%, whatever it is, something crazy. He leads the entire NFL from interior defensive tackles in pressure percentage and pressures. I think he's played amazing. That's a big loss for the Packers at this point. But nobody else really stepped up. LVN did have 2 pressures. Carl Brooks had 5, like I said. So there was definitely some there, but Micah was kind of a one-man wrecking crew in this one. Let's talk about the mistakes that led to the loss. So partly poor and sloppy clock management. I don't want to dive into this too much, right? And LaFleur I've seen a lot of Fire LaFleur tweets and videos this season. The local Madison media and Milwaukee media, some of the radio guys are really, really dramatic. I know they have to kind of generate clicks, but the whole Brian Gutekunst doesn't want to win a Super Bowl. And, I hear some of these things about how Matt LaFleur should be fired. Anybody who's saying fire LaFleur, like, come on. First of all, they're never going to during the season. And he is one of the top 10 coaches in the NFL. Look, he's got his issues, and we'll talk about them in a second here. But the idea that Matt LaFleur deserves to be fired is hilarious. This is still the youngest team in the NFL. I don't usually take what Colin Cowherd says to heart. In fact, I rarely ever do. The dude's almost always wrong. But he made a video this week talking about how it feels like Matt LaFleur is a chaperone, not a coach. It kind of feels like that. And, there's only so much you can do with literal children playing out there at times. They're going to make mistakes, right? As long as they're not making mistakes in January, even December, it's fine. So a lot of people talked about LaFleur not being aggressive enough. So let's talk about that. So at the end of the first half, I think they get up to the 40, and then they have a false start penalty. They got 20 seconds left. I don't even know if they were up at the 40. I think it was like the 25 or something. Crazy. So LaFleur should have, and he said it in his press conference yesterday, that he should have trusted his gut and just kneeled out the half. Instead, they try to get aggressive. They try to get a field goal before half. Jordan drops back to pass. Rasheed Walker gives up a pressure to, I don't remember who the hell it was, by the way. I think it was maybe Dante Fowler. Nobody good, by the way. And, Jordan gets stripped, and the Cowboys recover. They score a touchdown and make it 16-13. So LaFleur was aggressive there, and it bit him in the ass, right? He was aggressive last week when the Packers threw the ball in the fourth quarter, when they could have just punted it and made Cleveland go, 80-plus yards to tie the game. So the idea that Matt LaFleur isn't aggressive, he's just not aggressive when he should be, right? He's just making bad calls. I would argue, too, that there was a couple fourth downs in this one that he should have gone for that he didn't. There's been some conservative play calling here and there, like putting away those first 2 weeks, putting away the Commanders and the Lions. He wasn't putting them away. He was a bit too conservative on his play calls. So I think he needs to do a better job of leaning into the analytics, being a bit more, trusting his gut a little bit more. It just feels like it's kind of an emotional choice that he makes. You could argue that Cleveland game was lost because the Packers were too aggressive, right? So they need to really take a look at the decisions he's making. This does not make him a bad coach. Look, he's a really, really good coach. You could argue that, Andy Reid was called a bad coach for years, that he's never going to get over the hump, and then he takes a Chiefs team, win 3 Super Bowls, right? I don't want to get into that, but let's talk about overtime really quick. So obviously the Packers score. They make it 34-30. They kick the ball off. Dallas goes down and makes it 37-34. The Packers go and they tie it up at 37, miraculously, right? By the way, Jordan was so clutch on that drive, right? Then, good overtime, Dallas goes down, I think, get all the way to the 5-yard line. The Packers stop them, right? They get a field goal. The Packers have, 4 to 5 minutes left. They get all the way down to the 20, or something like that. And they have essentially 2 minutes to go 25, 30 yards. I think that's what it was. Sorry. And it just felt like they were just taking their sweet time. And there's been questions about, is it LaFleur's fault? Is it the player's fault? I don't think it ultimately matters. It just can't happen, right? It felt like LaFleur at that point was like, okay, we need to take as much time off the clock as we can, because if we only get a field goal and we give the Cowboys the ball back, they're going to go down and score again. You got to just go for a touchdown there. The chances that the Dallas Cowboys are going to go down and score a touchdown with the time left is so low. Now, granted, they did it in the fourth quarter, but that was improbable in general. So I just thought he played scared there. So again, I just think that needs to be looked at. I think LaFleur is a really, really good coach. His game plan's been good so far, I think, in most games, right? He just has to be a bit better in that one. Lastly, the missed extra point, the blocked extra point. I truly believe in my heart of hearts, if that did not happen, they would have won this game. Now, I know it was a 3-point swing. It should have been 14-0. Instead, it was 13-2. The game ended tied. It's very easy to point to that. I think the momentum was the part that really killed them, right? They get the touchdown. They're about to go up 14-0. And then they let another guy sneak through. They blocked the extra point. They return it for 2 points. And obviously that came to bite them in the ass again. So I don't know who to blame here. I know, oops, sorry about my alarm, guys. I don't know who to blame here. I really don't. It's easy to blame Bisaccia. I know, referencing Justice Mosqueda again from Acme Packing Company, he blames LaFleur for not letting Bisaccia use starters on special teams. I think that's also a reasonable conversation they need to have going into the bye. So they need to really fix the special teams. You could make the case so far that the only reason the Packers aren't 4-0 is because they're special teams. And they had, the game-winning kick ready to go in week 3. It was blocked. This game, they had the extra point blocked, return for 2, yes. But after the Packers go ahead 34-30, they kick the ball off to Dallas. They return it to the 45. So they were able to essentially, they only needed to go 50 yards in a minute and 52 seconds. That was not hard for them, especially the way they were playing. I want to just use this analogy or this comparison. Some of you may know about the 2010 Chargers team. Okay, this is like football lore, it's football legend, right? But it's a wild thing. The 2010 Chargers had the number 1 offense and the number 1 defense in the whole NFL. Their final record was 9-7, and they missed the playoffs, all because of a historically bad special teams. So, and then I don't need to remind you guys of the 2021 game that shall not be named, the 49ers game where, the Packers were winning essentially like 10-0 the whole game. The defense was playing out of their minds. They punt the ball late in the fourth quarter. The 49ers block it. They return it for a touchdown. They ended up losing that game by 3. And then in 2023, the 49ers playoff game in the divisional round, Anders Carlson misses the field goal in the playoffs. That would have made the game a bit easier for the Packers to win. It would have been a 24-24 tie. Packers would have only needed a field goal. Now, would he have made the field goal? It's a question, right? Special teams it just has to get better, right? This cannot happen again where they have this really, really good offense, this really, really good defense, which is already shaping up to be both, and then they have a shit special teams, right? So, and, let's remember, Bisaccia is the top paid special teams coach in the entire NFL. So it doesn't matter who to blame at this point. Somebody's got to take the blame. Somebody's got to fix it, right? Okay, let's talk about the top 5 players on offense and defense per PFF. Josh Jacobs was number 1 from PFF. I think he had a 90 grade. We didn't talk. I didn't bring this up too much earlier, but Josh Jacobs he's played well this season despite not having a lot of yards because the offensive line's been so bad. Bottom 5 or bottom 10 in the league in almost every from every organization, ESPN, PFF, whatever, at run blocking. Josh Jacobs has been able to find room despite that. He gets hit in the backfield at an abnormal rate. In this game, he finally found a few creases. The Cowboys' run defense is good, right? The Packers were able to definitely improve there, and I think that hopefully they can take this into week 6 when they get back from the bye. Jordan Love, 78.6. So far, top 5 in the NFL in PFF grade, and he deserves it, right? Number 3 was Darian Kinnard, the right tackle, obviously subbing in for Zach Tom / Anthony Belton. He had an 88 run block grade in this game. Best on the team. And even when he came in relief against the Lions, when Zach Tom went out, he had some really good run blocking snaps there. He's definitely not a starter. He's not one of your best 5, not by any stretch, but you got to love that, he's essentially your 7th offensive lineman, and he graded out really well in this game. I think he still gave up like 3 pressures, but 74.8 from your 7th lineman is pretty damn good in a game against the Cowboys. Tucker Kraft was 68, number 4 with 68 grade. He showed some really good run after catch in this one. He should have had 2 touchdowns on this one. He was like a yard short on both. And I think the second one should have been a touchdown, to be honest. I think that there was no clear evidence that he wasn't in the end zone. I think they called it on the field as a touchdown. So I don't know why they overturned it, but I digress. I didn't want to go into officiating in this game, but I thought there were a ton of missed calls. There was a pass interference late that should have been called on Wicks. There was an intentional grounding play that Dak had that wasn't called that would have set them back. I'm never going to be the guy who blames the refs, but come on, this was a really poorly officiated game. And I thought that Tucker Kraft second one should have been a touchdown. Last one, number 5 on the team, Jordan Morgan, 67.8. He had a 77 pass block grade. Again, playing left guard, standing in for Aaron Banks. I'm not convinced that Jordan Morgan's not going to be a better left guard than Aaron Banks. We'll see. Aaron Banks has not lived up to that contract yet. It's way too early to say he sucks and that it's not worth the money, but that could end up being true at the end. On defense, the top 5, Micah Parsons was 94.6. Highest graded defender in the league this week, I believe. Definitely the highest in the Packers. Not going to fawn all over him again. I could probably do this every single game, at least so far, but Go watch the All-22 on NFL Pro, guys. He could have easily had 3 sacks in this game had Dak just held the ball a little bit longer. So, and like I said, they were playing a guy in Dak Prescott who played out of his mind in this game. So you have to like what you saw from Micah in this one against his former team. I know he wanted to have a flashier game, but, I loved what he did in this game. Number 2, Edgerrin Cooper had a 77.5 grade. I'm actually surprised that his grade was this high. He missed a ton of tackles, right? Easily the worst tackling performance he's had. He had a pretty bad tackling game against the Eagles, his first pro game last year at the beginning of the season, but that was his first time ever playing in the NFL, right? You got to have some accident forgiveness there. I said earlier they gave him a 29 tackling grade, which is abysmal. Again, 60's average, right? Coverage-wise, he actually had a 75 grade, so definitely helped his grade a little bit. He was definitely in the right place every time in this game. He just wasn't able to make the tackle in a lot of cases. Rashawn Gary was number 3 with a 71.3. His pass rush grade was 55. So again, I mentioned that he didn't have a single pressure in this game. It felt like he just used the bull rush the entire game. He's been pretty good at using the swim move in the games. He does that little cross chop where he dips his shoulder. He has some stuff in his bag that he didn't use in this one. It was almost completely a bull rush. I felt like he went into the game thinking, okay, I can overpower these tackles. And, maybe that's true. In fact, there were several snaps where it looked like he was going to win, but Dak just got rid of the ball. So he needed to win quicker in this one, and he didn't. But his run defense was insane. He's been a really good run defender for basically the last 2 seasons, and he was really good in this one also. Number 4 was Evan Williams, 69.3, well above average. Have to agree. His tackling grade was 83, so he was one of the few guys that actually tackled. That deep ball to Pickens, right? That one that Pickens had just he makes an insane catch every game. The dude he's a baller, man. He's kind of a douche from what I've read, but he can ball, man. And I thought Evan Williams was way too passive chasing that ball down. He ranged all the way across the field. Dak put a ton of air on it. And I thought that Evan Williams had a chance to pick it. It looked like he just kind of let up at the end, like he didn't want to have a collision with the receiver, but the defender has every right to get that ball. So I think he should have fought a little bit harder for that. Number 5 was LVN. He had a 65 grade in this one. His run defense was only 51, which is a bit surprising considering he's been a pretty good run defender his whole career so far. But his pass rush grade is 71 in this one. He had 2 pressures in this one. There were a couple others, right, where he could have easily had a sack, and, Dak just got the ball out again. 2 pressures in this one. His pass rush win rate was 21.7. So again, that's high. Anytime you're over 15, that's a really good game. So 21.7, very, very good. To summarize it, offensively, this is the kind of game that we needed to see from the Packers. Get back in rhythm. Yeah, the offensive line, they gave up 13 pressures, right? It wasn't a great day at the office, but it felt like, similar to Dak, he had all the time he needed to do what he needed to do. So I liked the game from the offensive line. It definitely improved over last week. Main thing, run blocking, right? This was the first game where it looked like Josh Jacobs finally had room to move and be the special player that he is. In terms of the offense overall, I have zero concerns. I think the fact that Jordan's playing at an MVP level, yes, even with the pick last week, I wanted to see a bounce back game from the offense in general. They put up, I think it was 500 yards or something like that. Just a crazy, crazy game. I do think that when they get both starters back, Aaron Banks and Zach Tom back, hopefully after the bye, they're going to see a lot better pass protection. I mean, think about in week 1, guys, I know the run blocking wasn't great. I think it's mostly because of Detroit, but Detroit has been putting pressure on everybody, right? I know I went into that game saying like, oh, they don't have anybody aside from Aiden Hutchinson that can beat you, right? I still believe that, but Jordan Love had 20 days to throw back there in week 1, and that's the last time the offensive line was fully healthy. So I do think that once everybody's healthy, they're going to look a lot better. On defense, okay, I know it's very easy to be concerned after this performance. In the moment, it was like, man, was the first 3.5 weeks a mirage, right? When you watch the game back, you can see like they really lost the game on defense from poor tackling, which tackling can be a bit up and down at times, right? And because Dak was just insanely good in this one. One of the best quarterbacking performance against the Packers that I've seen in a long time. So if I'm being honest, right, It's the first time I've seen bad tackling. 3.5 weeks into the season, they looked really, really, really good. The defense took a turn after they gave up that end of half touchdown. And again, that wasn't the defense's fault. 7 points in this game was on the offense, right? When they recovered Jordan Love's fumble, they were on the 5, right? So you can't even make the argument they gave up 40 points. They really gave up about, 33, I guess, if you're being charitable. I think they can get everything wrong corrected on the bye week, and I think they will. The cornerbacks, I'm still a little bit nervous. I've said it probably 20 times in the podcast, right? Like, I don't think it mattered who was playing corner in this one. If Jair was here, they were still going to see Dak play a really good game, right? And by the way, Jair is still hurt for the Ravens. I think we need to give it some time before we worry about the defense. If they come out against the Bengals in week 6 and they play like crap against the Bengals, now granted, not to tease too much here, but the Bengals still have Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. They got Noah Fant. They got some good weapons, right? Ultimately, I don't think that that's a mismatch by any means, but if they come out and play like crap again against these next 4 teams, then we can be a bit more concerned. But I do think they're going to get it corrected. The pass rush was more than okay. Again, Dak was pressured 19 times. Green Bay still leads the league in pressures. Micah Parsons is a one-man wrecking crew. I got zero concerns about him and LVN and Gary. Again, the Wyatt injury makes me nervous. If he misses a ton of time, I'm concerned, right? But if it's just 3-4 games, they can get by with that, him being week to week. They just need him healthy come crunch time, okay? So penalties, they were better. Still too many pre-snap penalties. I thought the game was pretty poorly officiated, like I said, but if the Packers can be better from a mental standpoint, they can fix some of the pre-snap stuff. They're going to get called for a hold every game. It just is what it is. No team is going to be penalty free in a game. And ultimately, if you fix the mental errors, I think that ultimately we see a better product out there. Special teams was just bad. I know I'm not the only podcaster that said this, but I just want competent special teams. I don't want top 5. I don't want top 10. I don't even want top 15. I just want something better than what they've had. So we're 4 weeks in. The Packers are 2-1-1, and that tie just hurts to read, by the way. They've shown us a impossibly high ceiling of a Super Bowl team and a floor of what I would call a first-round exit team. So regardless, I think this team's still a playoff team. I still think it's the Eagles, Packers, Lions, I guess the Rams. I know I'm a lot lower on the Rams than most people, but Stafford's played really, really well. Nakua looks like the best receiver in the league this year. Still got Devontae. So we'll see. I still think it's a 4-team race. I think the Seahawks have a say about that. I think the Buccaneers do too. That's your 6 right there. And then there's one more team that will emerge somewhere else. I think that's about the same, and that's going to stay that way the whole season. They just need to start stacking wins, right? They just need to show us they can be one of the final 4 teams in the league at the end of the season. Next 4 games, they got the Bengals, no Joe Burrow. They look like one of the worst teams in the NFL right now, and that's at Lambeau after the bye. Then they have the Cardinals, which I think is a sneaky tough game. I think the Packers will still be favored in that one, but even in Arizona, I think the Packers can win that game. They're the better team for sure. And then it's the Steelers, Packers in Pittsburgh, which is going to be a ton of fun. All we're going to hear that whole week is Aaron Rodgers returning to play his old team. Whatever happens, guys, you can say whatever you want about Rodgers. He's going to go into that game playing his best. I'm sure he's going to want to have the middle finger up to Goody for saying, "Oh, it's too early or it's time to move on from you," even though it was the right decision. So the Packers need to be ready in that one. If there's a game of these 4 that I'm most nervous about, it's that Steelers game. And then they play the Panthers at home, and I think the Panthers can be good. Definitely don't think they should be favored. Of course, the Packers should win that game fairly easily, but they really can't sleep on any of these 4 games, but they could easily go into the final or the next game. The Eagles at home on Monday night, that's probably the most exciting game of the season. They could go into that game at 6-1-1. And if you do that, I think they can go into that game with some momentum, and then they can kind of cook with gas going forward. For the people that looked at the schedule at the beginning of the season and said, "Oh, it's a hard schedule," like actually it turns out it really isn't, especially considering the Ravens are 1-3. Man. Before we wrap up, I want to remind everything of one more thing. Okay. If you look at all the previous Super Bowl teams, very few of them in recent memory have started out super hot, right? The Chiefs in 22 and 23, there were questions about if they were even any good, right? Look at the power rankings from that season. They were winning games, but everyone was like, man, they look off. They don't look good. And then, they just would turn it on late in the season. The Eagles last season, they were 2-2. after 4 games. The Rams in 2021, they didn't start great either. I think they were 5-4, 5-3 at one point. They even lost to the Packers that season. The 2020 Buccaneers, right? The Tom Brady Bucks. They started out, I believe, 5-3 that season too. Still had 5 losses. The point I'm trying to make is just because the Packers aren't 4-0, right? Even though I think they could be 4-0 if they just play a little better. As long as they're playing at a high level at the end of the season, that's what we're looking for here. I think the best is yet to come for this team. They were going to hit some adversity at some point. They're going to hit it again, right? They're going to go on a bit of a streak here at some point where they look really, really good again. And then they'll probably just lay a donut. And that's the product of having the youngest team in the league. Aaron Rodgers said one time, every team, every season needs to learn how to win every single season. Every season's unique. This is the youngest team in the league. They've shown moments where they look like it. They've also shown moments where they look like the best team in the league, right? So all the national media and the pundits, they've already started this, by the way. I've heard it. They're all going to start writing the Packers off and saying, oh, we were too high on them and all that. Let them go and crown the Rams, the Buccaneers, the Lions, I think deservedly so. The Eagles, right? They deserve to be at the top of the power rankings, even though I don't think they are. Watch that offense once and tell me they're the best team in the league. They're not. So again, let's give it some more time before we freak out. Let's let it all play out. Let's let the 4 games play out before we start saying that, this team sucks and they should fire LaFleur and all that, right? All right, guys, going into the bye week, obviously the Packers don't play next weekend or this weekend coming up, and that bye week's going to be over before we know it. Literally less than a week from now, we're going to be talking about the Bengals. Normally an early bye, it's really unfortunate, right? But considering how bad they've played recently, in my opinion, how unhealthy they are, how much they need a break, I think this bye comes at the perfect time. Self-scout will happen in the bye week, like always. I hope LaFleur does what he needs to do to make sure there's a better product on the field when we get out there. I'll be doing another episode on Saturday this season. I'm going to call it a season superlatives episode where we kind of go through some questions that, for example, who's the most surprising Packer this season? That's one of them. What are you most concerned about going into the playoffs? All that stuff. We're going to have all those questions and more. We will also take a look at my bold predictions in that episode and see kind of where they're at so far. So we'll still do some content. And then next week, we'll preview the Bengals, do the recap. 2 episodes a week. If you guys can do me a favor and like and subscribe to the YouTube channel, that's helpful. If you can leave a 5-star review, send me your questions. I'd love to answer a question live. I did have one that someone asked that I kind of went over already today. I'll talk about that coming up. And I just appreciate you guys listening, and I will see you guys on Saturday. In the meantime, go Pack, go.